So that was Joni Pilato of the well-known Joni and Sparrow, who will be playing at the benefit next Sunday at Heartland Bar. That's all day afternoon from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. 20 groups, fun time. Yeah, so here we are facing not our first, not our second, but our third Attorney General candidate. This go.
We like them all.
We've got a deep bench there.
Yeah.
Sharon, welcome to Live from the Heartland.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thanks for
Glad
coming
to be
up.
here. Sure.
Your buddy out there has been on the show a few times.
Yeah, I'm sure she has.
And she and I worked together on a couple of different campaigns in the past. So I'm real glad to have you.
Thank you.
When I first heard your name, another friend of mine, good lawyer, defense lawyer, named Ellen Dowd,
Oh, yeah.
said to me, she's the best.
Oh, that's so nice to hear.
Said to me, she's the best. I said, well, I got to know this person. So I'm really glad. So it is quite a journey from police reform panel, which you is almost, tell me if I'm wrong, I think as soon as Lisa Madigan announced, you were like the next day saying, I'm done, IPRA, I'm running. Am I right?
It was yes, the timing was very close, but the two decisions were actually very unrelated. So
Oh, yeah?
I mean, I had been planning to step down at IPRA before Lisa announced. And the reason is this, I obviously I had this incredible journey building a new agency and really proud and accomplished a lot. But I started to feel like I was an anchor weighing the agency down because everywhere I went, people were asking me, what's different if you're still the head? And so I really wanted the agency, I really felt it was an appropriate time for me to pass the baton to somebody else to take the agency forward so that everything would be new. And I really felt that was important. I really want the agency to be perceived as not just IPRA 2.0, that it really is a new agency, and we worked so hard to sort of cut all the ties and really create what I think is a best-in-class civilian oversight agency.
Okay, we are going to ask you more about the race, but since you brought it up, we've talked a lot about IPRA and its prior
Sure.
incarnation and everything, all the business they're supposed to deal with on this show.
Mm-hmm.
We're very, very into, changing Chicago's culture and the police
Absolutely.
that way.
Mm-hmm.
So do you feel like IPRA, even though it's just kind of a changing around of the...
Tell us what IPRA is for our listeners.
Okay, the...
Independent Police Review Authority. So
IPRA.
Not
IPRA.
So the Independent Police Review Authority was the civilian oversight agency for the police department that was formed around 2008, and very similar circumstances to what we experienced with the Laquan McDonald controversy. Right? There was a police-involved
shooting
incident. It wasn't a shooting. It was a brutality incident that really undermined people's trust in the accountability system. So the city passed this ordinance creating what was supposed to be this independent civilian oversight agency.
Right.
But the problem was that it never really cut the ties to the police department. The work at the time was being done by a department within the Chicago Police Department called the Office of Professional Services.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And it was filled with civilian investigators, and literally all they did was move that group of individuals to a new location and then slap a new name on the door. They didn't really change anything else about the way the organization operated. And hence, there were a number of structural impediments to independence that existed with IPRA. So IPRA's failure is not terribly surprising when you look at that history. So with the Civilian Office of Police Accountability, we tried to sever all those ties. So first, rather than just moving all the employees over, we had a very rigorous hiring process we did a national recruiting effort. We had over 1,000 applicants for the jobs at the agency, and everybody who had served for IPRA had to reapply and go through the same rigorous process that external candidates
When did this process start? Sure.
It started last fall.
So it was just, it was.
I mean, the
just
fall
last
before, yeah. So we started, and it was a big undertaking. So these individuals, for example, had to go skills-based testing, as well as a pretty rigorous interview process in order to get a job as an investigator at the new agency. So that was one thing. And then, of course, the other thing was we completely redesigned all the processes and procedures and policies that govern the way the agency operates, all with an eye towards integrity, transparency, and independence. So that's one thing. And then, of course, we put them all through training. So before they could take on a case, they all went through at least 6 weeks of training.
Okay.
And IPRA had never done that.
Right.
Sharon Fairley, What's it like for a first-time politician seeking statewide office, what was held by a respected incumbent leaving on her own?
So yeah, this has really been a big undertaking, but I've had a fantastic experience, and I really feel so honored to have had the opportunity to take on this race and to be part of this race and to take on this challenge. You know, obviously, Attorney General Madigan has done a lot of good work, and she's created a very, very strong organization. And so I think, you know, all the candidates now are talking about how can we take what she's done and built upon it and make it better and even be able to accomplish more on behalf of the citizens of Illinois. And so, you know, I'm not a politician, so, you know, I think...
Well, you are now.
Yeah.
Well, I'm trying to become one.
Hate to tell you, babe.
Yeah, but I think the difference between me and some of the other candidates is I'm not in this race because I'm trying to, you know, reach the next notch in my political career. I literally have no interest in politics or political office other than this. I love being a lawyer. I became a lawyer to serve. I love what I've done as a lawyer. I have had great experiences, and I really just like trying to be the person that's in the job to make the right decisions, to do what's right by the people that I serve. And you know, that's how I've tried to conduct myself so far, and that's why I'm in this race now.
Let me just ask a couple quick questions. I've asked this of the other AG candidates that have been on our show. Does anyone know why Lisa Madigan decided to give up the seat? Do you have any insight to that?
I don't have any insight
Okay.
to that. Although
Next
I get asked that question all the time.
Yeah,
Everybody,
people
no
wanna
one
know.
knows.
Yeah.
And the other question is, do you think, there's 8 candidates that I know of in this race.
Yes.
Do you think that our current mayor, Rahm Emanuel, has a horse in this race?
And are you it?
You know, I think people say just be, oh, you know, she was appointed by Rahm Emanuel, and I have to chuckle whenever I hear that. And the reason is this: it's not like he gave me this big, cushy plum job, right? I mean, I took on what was essentially a hot mess, right? And I agreed to do it because I believed that I had the skills and experience to actually make some headway and fix the thing.
But that's what you do for your best friends.
Yeah.
And with your best friends, you give them a hot mess.
So I don't, you know, I think I proved in the years that I worked for the city that I can be independent. You know, I definitely pushed back on the administration on several fronts. You know, when they were looking to pass the ordinance that create the new agency, for example, I really stood strong for 2 really important aspects that I felt were important for COPA to be independent. One was the budget floor, and then the other was the power to bring in outside legal expertise. And these were things that they really didn't want to do. And I just, you know, I worked to get the coalition of...
Was that in the prosecutor's office you were pushing for that?
No, this is when we were creating the ordinance for the Civilian Office of Police Accountability.
Okay.
And I was really delighted to work closely with some of the aldermen who agreed with me. And ultimately, we were able to get that done. So, you know, when I took on that job, I mean, you can imagine what it was like to stand up and walk onto the scene of an officer-involved shooting, and here I am, a black woman, you know, walking onto the scene, trying to interact with detectives who've been on the force for 30, 35 years, and, you know, telling them, no, you know, here's the way I'd like to see the evidence collected.
Mm-hmm.
This was a challenge. I mean, this was a challenge, but this is something that I've done my whole life. You know, I was born into the Jim Crow era, right? And so I've always had to work hard, and through hard work and perseverance, I stood up for myself, and as a lawyer, I've stood up for the clients that I represent, and this is just how I do things.
So you just brought it up, and I was going to ask you your justice priorities. So I have 2 questions, Michael.
Go ahead, Kate, ask all the questions you like.
I noticed you come out of Annapolis or Maryland.
Yes.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and you went to Princeton.
I did.
Girl. I mean, what brought you to Chicago?
I came here when I went to law school.
For U of C?
So I went to University of Chicago Law School.
So you were there with all the numbers. I mean, Obama's.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, you know, I also, you know, because I was in school at Princeton with Mrs. Obama and her brother Craig, right? And so we go back a fairly long way.
Mhm.
So, yes.
Yeah.
And of course, yeah, and so the president was there when I started law school teaching.
We were there when he started, so we knew about
Yeah.
little young Barack because he came here because of our good friend Harold Washington.
I got another
Yes.
question, or you
Wait,
got one more? Go
I
ahead.
got one more.
Okay.
What would be
We got
your?
questions galore.
Of course you do, Michael.
No, we do.
What would your priorities, justice priorities in this position be?
Yeah, so
Okay.
really, I mean, there are 3 things that I really are important that I'd like to focus on. The first, and this obviously relates to where I've come from professionally, is I believe that the office can play a much more stronger and proactive role in public safety. And so that includes the police reform piece. But it also is just really working to improve the relationships between law enforcement agencies and the communities that they serve throughout the state. And then also working on, dealing with crime, fighting violent crime, fighting gun violence. I would like to bring a much more strategic focus to that of the office and help work with our law enforcement agencies, because violent crime is not just an issue in Chicago, this is a statewide issue. We need to work on smart strategies. We need to learn from the jurisdictions across the country who are also suffering from similar challenges and have identified ways to address them that actually work from a law enforcement perspective. And I'd like to make sure that we're doing that so we can make some headway. I really got concerned about the effectiveness of the Chicago Police Department when, it's been, announced that last year the murder closure rate was only 17%.
Right.
I mean, that's just really, really concerning. So we need this police reform because it really makes a big difference from a public safety perspective. And I believe the Attorney General, not only in terms of pushing through reform for the police department, but more broadly, can help promote public safety throughout the state. The second thing, and I've talked a lot about this so far in the race, is more integrity and transparency out of our government. I think we have some problems here.
You think?
And my next one, go ahead.
Yeah, and so that's an area. Then I've sort of put out a platform of ideas that I'd like to see promulgated under my leadership. And then the third piece is really what I consider the bread and butter of any Attorney General's office, which is protecting consumers from harmful policies, whether it's political actors or corrupt corporations trying to exploit consumers. The enforcement of Illinois law against abusive and exploitive tactics by business, or the external threats that are presented by the Trump administration and the Rauner administration, frankly. We know that, for example, under Governor Rauner, the enforcement by the EPA is like down by, I don't know, 2/3 or something. So this is affecting people's lives, and we're talking about our health here, access to clean water and clean air, and clean land. It's really important that the Attorney General be someone who's strong and who has not only the courage and tenacity, but also the legal prowess to stand up to these forces and prevail. And so that's one of the reasons why I really want to be involved in this.
Sharon Fairley, speaking of Rauner, can you assess the governor's race? Of the leading candidates to challenge the current governor, whom would you most look forward to working with?
I think that they all have various strengths and weaknesses, and I think it's a really interesting field. I think that the voters have a really important decision to make coming up in March. I personally haven't really made up my mind yet, to be honest with you. I'm still thinking about it. There's something that I like about each of the candidates in the race. And so I'm going to be working on that too.
You're very diplomatic.
Well, no, you picked that up on the campaign trail, much less in courtrooms. The other thing that we were looking at a lot this year was oversight of the police reform.
Sure.
And the fact that we do not have a consent decree.
Right.
When Lisa Madigan stood up and started the suit, which Ram joined her in right after, which is confusing. We're part of the community members of that suit brought to get some oversight and get a consent decree. How do you feel about that? How should that be assisted? How should that be dealt with? Should be being dealt with?
You mean the consent decree in general?
In general, yeah.
Well, so
should they have federal oversight?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So I was really glad when she stepped in to fill the void left by the Trump administration to seek, court-monitored oversight of the reforms. We know that when it comes to a department that has as significant and as deep a problem as we are seeing here in Chicago, that really the only way to engender true and lasting reform is through court oversight and court monitorship. And so this is definitely the right direction to go. Mm-hmm. And so I applauded that effort. I think that people are wondering, why is it taking so long right now? But I think that,
some people more than others.
Yeah, I think that it's a complicated process. And, you know, the Attorney General, I'm sure, wanted to go in and assess the situation for herself, rather than just relying on the reporting of others.
Right.
There's a lot of information out there, but, you know, now we've got to really put the pedal to the metal and get a reform plan that actually makes sense. It's going to be a very big effort, because in my view, the department needs reform in virtually every aspect of its being.
Real glad to hear you say that.
Yeah, I mean, so from, you know, the way officers are recruited, we know that the recruiting process really undermines getting people of color on the force. And so we've got to understand why that's happening and then correct that. We also need to make sure that we're recruiting officers who want to be guardians, not necessarily warriors all the time.
Thank you.
And then, so then we have...
Guardians, not warriors.
I took the cop exam in 1975.
Did you?
Along with 30,000 of my favorite fellow Chicagoans.
Wow.
Yeah,
So from recruiting to training...
I wanted to be a guardian.
Yes, it's important,
You are.
right? That's part of the job. So training, we know that training is an issue. That's been very well documented. And so that's why, for example, as part of my platform, I'd like to see annual training on use of force, de-escalation, crisis intervention, and implicit bias, not only for the Chicago Police Department,
Thank
but
you.
every police department.
Thank you.
So training is an issue. Supervision, we know that the department has really struggled with providing adequate supervision. So we need to make sure that we are training, field training officers, and also supervisors, and also having an appropriate span of control. So supervision, evaluation. The way officers are actually evaluated needs to change so that they can actually be given real feedback about how are you doing with your job performance, and then when there are problems that are identified, that they're rectified. That includes, you know, an early intervention program. And then, of course, then at the end we get to the accountability system, which, even though I think the Civilian Office of Police Accountability is poised to do great work, it's only one part of that system, and there's a lot of problems with the accountability system beyond that.
Sharon Fairley, what a great joy it is to meet you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for putting yourself out there on our
Sure.
behalf to
Sure,
run
absolutely.
for Attorney General.
Thank you.
It's a pretty wide field. I applaud you for getting out there and you know, and trying to make sure everybody knows your name.
Yeah, I
There's
really
a few guys whose names are
Sharon
known.
Fairley, Sharon Fairley, know
Yeah.
that name.
I appreciate
Thanks
it.
for coming out.
Thanks for having me.
Once you're in office, you'll never come back. But
no.
Oh, yes, you will.
but maybe you will.
I will.
All
promise.
right.
All right, thanks a lot.
peace and blessings
Take
to
care.
you.
Good morning,
Take a
everyone.
break.
All right, you're listening to Live from the Heartland, WLUW 88.7 FM and WLUW.org. Please like us on Facebook and come right back after this musical break to listen to Larry Sufferton shoot it with us.